Yes, Stan, go ahead, please.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the topic of the abomination of desolation, and perhaps I misunderstood you, but did I understand you correctly? Will there be a literal abomination of desolation in a centralized location, or is that phrase a Simeon for an individual forsaking God? I'm done.
Uh, when it comes to New Covenant, temple is not at one centralized geographical location, right? It is in the hearts and minds of Christians, his people. So he is scattered. Now, abomination, desolation is not definitively fixated to a one place or one time. Uh, one place and one time, we're not thinking spiritual. So it can happen multiple times and multiple places in multiple generations in the lives of Christians. And it can also happen at individual level. Just one person, if you take me, my heart and my mind, I can set up idols paving a way for God to leave me. God's presence is left and abomination is set up. Or abomination is set up first and God's presence leaves. And then I would be desolate because I was abandoned and eventually I would get destroyed. That is the script that is specified. We can apply it as an individual level. And then, more importantly, this script is discussed in group situations. If two or three meet together and we form a group, the group is subjected to these dynamics. And a Zoom room and a church, a mega church, at a country or a city, it's very spiritual. The scripts run at multiple places, multiple times, in multiple generations, and more than once the life of a Christian. So I don't believe there is one centralized location, Stan.
So, if I can ask further, then is it true that we should not be looking for some man to emerge at Jerusalem and act the way Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth did, speaking blasphemies, uh, trying to mislead people? Is it true then that there will not be a literal human being or whatever in Jerusalem attempting to sway people? Is that what you're saying or no?
Okay, that's the traditional teaching of bulk of the Christianity. They believe a literal temple, a literal antichrist sitting there, and literal blasphemies, and everything literal. And the question we should ask is that what scriptures are laying down for us? If you ask me, scriptures are not laying down that scenario. But would that happen? Probably it would happen. I believe it is happening now. At least the direction, the way they are building the third temple, that's what it is going there. And can they mimic some antichrist kind of figure, either manufactured or something, and bring that person and run the script literally? They can. But is God referring to that? I would think it is not. I think it's a fake. It's a decoy. It's designed to distract you from the true abomination, desolation that Bible clearly lays down. So here Bible is talking about the dangers Christians face with the abomination, desolation. Primarily, it is a spiritual concept. Now, you're taking a spiritual concept and trying to run it, force it in a physical way. I think it's a distraction. It's you are not receiving the real warnings and dangers from Bible, but you are being succumbed to some deceptive supposed fulfillment of abomination desolation. That far I can answer your question. I don't know if I'm making clear. Ask more.
I see your point. It can be dangerous for a Christian to think, if he takes it literally and does not look at the spiritual application, I can see where it would be dangerous because he could fall into the trap. Until I see a physical being emerging at Jerusalem, I am okay. That can be a dangerous idea. I understand that. So I guess I am done. Thank you for your response.
You're welcome. I will address that eventually when we come to spiritual Babylon. That's also kind of prophesied. They will try to run physically. They will try to deceive even the elect if possible. So that's your question is very valid, but at this point I cannot give you a comprehensive answer, but at least I gave you a direction, general direction where the deception is going. Yes, Marlene.
I'm looking at 1 Kings 9:8 and 9, when it says everybody passing by will be astonished and hiss and say, "Why has God done this?" And they'll say, "Because they abandoned the Lord." Who is this everyone that's saying this? You would think that the ones that are turning away from God, the others wouldn't know that or understand that they're turning away from God. So, what's your understanding about who this everyone is that is responding this way?
That's a good question. Marlene, at this stage of our learning, let me say it this way. In the shadow, when this is run, when Jerusalem was burnt and temple was burnt and looted, and the whole Judeans, except very few poor farmers, they were all taken captive. Everybody mocked at Israel. Who were everybody in that shadow? All the nations, all the enemies of Israel, actually, all the Philistines, all the Moabites, Ammonites, all the ites that are left, all of them were rejoicing, and even uh, Edom. Edom were also laughing, and God said, I will bring judgment on you because you are laughing and rejoicing when your brother is judged. So all of them. Now, if I take this shadow and bring it to spiritual reality, there are several possibilities. Now we are talking about possibilities. I see one possible scenario is outer darkness. People who made it into New Jerusalem have made it, and who did not make it into first resurrection, they end up in outer darkness. Outer darkness is everybody that have not made into New Jerusalem. So who are everybody? I believe they are all, and all would mock, would 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 laugh and scorn at whom? The people called themselves Christians and did not make it into New Jerusalem. To be narrow, people who received Holy Spirit of God and understood truth, but failed to flee the abomination desolation, failed to address this topic, and failed to meet all the covenantal obligations, that is, all the teachings of Jesus Christ. They never cared even to study, or they studied, but they listened to their pastors. There are several scenarios. They end up, and then what happens? They were the temple, now they are abandoned. They were spiritual Israel, but they are no longer Israel. They were spiritual Judea, They were no longer Israel. All these concepts, Israel, Judea, Jerusalem, temple, they're all representations. Now we translate these representations into the spiritual realm. I think all the people who were never called, like Hindus, Buddhists, and all the Catholics who were not called, as according to our understanding, they will laugh and mock us, mock at us. Why did this happen to them? Then they will also answer, because they failed to obey the voice of their God, Jesus Christ, either Moses or David. Both translate to Jesus Christ. So I think that's one possibility, one scenario I see. People would laugh at us. Your next door neighbor, you thought he's not at all a Christian, but now he would mock at you because these are very serious and very, very, how shall I put it, very sobering, this concept. But I am very glad that you asked it, how all would mock. I think all would mock at us when we end up in outer darkness. Is it helpful or remotely helpful? Or
So that would mean they would have to have some understanding then about God, some perception in order to realize this is what's going on.
they would have some understanding, correct? They would see who are in New Jerusalem, and they have some kind of interface. They can speak to one to another, but they cannot cross over the gulf. There's a gulf. Remember the parable we discussed in last feast, Lazarus, and the
Right.
rich man, that kind of concept.
Yep.
Yeah.
We
Hmm.
do.
Yeah. So they
Okay.
recognize, each party on one side would recognize the other side. So people in New Jerusalem would recognize people who are all in the outer darkness. Vice versa, people in the outer darkness would also see people who made it into the New Jerusalem. They would be sad that they couldn't make it, but they would laugh to their scorn because these Christians, they failed. The failure is not sinning under temptation. The failure is to be negligent about abomination, desolation warning. These warnings, actually, if you understand, they're pretty straightforward and simple. But they need diligence. You need that fervent seeking of God's face. That's how David survived in spite of his grievous sins. David made it into right standing because he has that great zeal, great motivation to see God's face. He has such a high reverence for God, and he seeks with the whole heart, no matter what. That kind of attitude actually brings us uh, out of the dangers of abomination, desolation. That fervent zeal and fervent motivation and awesome respect, these are like attitudinal, relational attributes. Those you can work now. But total sinlessness, it's very difficult to attain a high track record of sinlessness. That's what David's example tells us. In spite of Bathsheba, in spite of Uriah, why this man made it? Because of his approach, attitude, and zeal. He repents and turns. He wants God. He loves God. But look at Solomon and look at Saul, King Saul. They don't have that fervent desire for God. They have negligent and careless attitude. I think that's where people end up. Again, there's some conjecture, but we will discuss these things. These become more clear and more evident we will have more information coming out of scriptures. But I'm so glad that you are asking these questions. Let's go to Stan.
Yes, the people who are in our outer darkness. This is kind of picking up on what Marlene said. People in outer darkness, they must have been called either in the second resurrection and chose wrongly, or perhaps they were called before Christ returned and chose wrongly. Because if I understand the plan of God, everyone will get one fair opportunity in God's eyes. So the people that go into outer darkness must at some point, when God was giving them their fair chance, must have decided against that. Correct? I'm done.
I'm hesitant to say yes, correct. I know that's an old church doctrine. People would be given only one chance. This I don't see that in scriptures clearly. I think I I kind of distance myself with that one chance thing. Perhaps you might be given several chances depending on God's choice. Some may not get the second chance. Some, like those are so wicked, they may not get even the first chance. So it's very, very, the word strange may not be right word, but the strange, the way God works and operates. People who crucified Jesus Christ knowingly, they're out. Their names will be blotted out of book of living. That's what Christ requested in Psalm 69. So they were not given necessarily the knowledge of salvation, of all the understanding, but their names are wiped out. But here, people who, we can list the various things Christ mentioned. These guys would end up in outer darkness. If you consider all those people, I believe they are all Christians, and they, because of their negligence, lack of fervent spirit, and they fail to seek face of God, I think they end up there, and at some point they might, again, this is my opinion, conjecture, at some point God would visit them. It is enough that they suffered in the outer darkness. They are weeping and gnashing of teeth. Perhaps uh, some righteous man may pray for them, and perhaps some solution God might come up with in future. At this point, whatever Christ refers is, there's a place you don't want to be. So
Yep.
do everything you can so that you do not end up there. That's kind of teaching, it seems to me. So it's a bad place to end up. So do everything you can.
Yes. Okay. Can I interject?
Yes.
When
Go
you
ahead.
made the statement, I thought I remembered you making the statement, some may not get a first chance. If that's true, doesn't that border on predestination to damnation? I'm done.
Because Psalm 69, somehow you have to reconcile. They crucified Christ. I think this also applies to those who crucified, those who killed prophets, and also those who killed Christians. They are put into a different bucket, I think. And also who have known the depths of Satan, whatever deep Satanism. Not that God cannot forgive them, not that God is not capable of bringing salvation to them. I think it's a policy laid down. It's a God's policy. So I don't, if their names are blotted out of book of living, then you can argue that their names may be written back again, book of life, brother, and they would be given salvation again. Then you are going in the universal reconciliation. If you want, you can go there, but every person has a different take and different understanding. At this point, I don't see that. I don't see universal reconciliation. But these are all little bit, you have to take them in with a grain of salt, Stan. These are not absolute truths that we are discussing.
God has.
Okay. Okay. I am done because I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but maybe I have already.
We don't have any hands being raised. If you want, you can continue to explore with your questions. That might help somebody else.
Yeah.
So feel free, anybody. So we have to reason together with the verses that are given to us in pages of Bible. So we see these set of verses. We try to reason together, harmonize together, bring them together and make some sense. But we get better at them. But can you infer that they are absolute truths? No, I think it's a work of faith and work of reasoning, and we get better over the years. We understand more. So the nature of things we are concluding are not absolute truths, because very little information is given about outer darkness. That concept is totally hidden in Old Testament. From Genesis to Malachi, nothing is known about outer darkness. Maybe there is a hint here and there, but nothing concrete until Christ comes and reveals this, a thing called outer darkness. He also introduced several concepts which are totally new. There's a thing called furnace of fire. What is that? It's not lake of fire. It's a furnace of fire. There's also Gehenna fire. So he has different spiritual constructs he introduced. If you don't have any parallels in the Old Testament for these things, at least with my limited understanding and knowledge of Old Testament scriptures, I couldn't see any parallels for these concepts. They seem to be totally brand new, but somebody who has studied more than me or more number of years than me may see some things out of what this furnace of fire is. What is this outer darkness? So it's all relative efforts that you have put, a relative amount of prayer you have done on your knees. All these factors would bring difference in these matters. So no hard conclusions. We can't condemn somebody who is not agreeing with us in these conclusions. At least, like, I think I would be glad if you're beginning to see abomination, desolation as a script. Then we are making a good progress. Next Tuesday, God willing, we will start with Ezekiel 8. That takes at least 2 to 3 presentations. It's an awful lot. We were told how the abomination desolation actually happened to this temple, which Solomon built in the shadow. That brings lots of wealth of information for us, New Covenant Israel. Yes, Marlene.
I was looking at 1 Kings 9:2, where God says he appeared to Solomon the second time as he appeared to him the first time.
Mhm.
And looking back at 1 Kings 3:5, where he appeared to him in a dream by night.
Mhm.
And before I read this, I used to think, well, it's daytime and he's talking with him, and this is a dream he's talking to him. This was something I for some reason didn't click. So I'm just showing that how, so he's talking to him in a dream and he's responding in a dream, which is kind of unusual. I mean, you usually look at dreams as not reality, but yet he's saying, you know, give me the wisdom and everything, because I'm going to need to know how to rule these people, and doing all this serious conversation in a dream. And then he's coming to him again at night and talking with him. Anyway, I always thought it was daylight and he, you know, he's out in the open and he's thinking, you know, and aware, and not a dream. Just throwing that out there.
That's a very interesting point that you raised. I wish somebody could study those things, night visions and day visions. Even Daniel has night visions sometimes. Sometimes it's day, sometimes through dream, and sometimes it's just a vision. Is taken somewhere else. Like Ezekiel 8, that's another. I don't see any parallel there. He was held by the locks of his hair on the top, and this angelic being pulls him up and transports him and shows him this abomination desolation. What is that?
That would hurt.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a ground rule. We should be aware that when they're transported in some kind of vision, some kind of spiritual realm, he's no longer on earth. He's transported into realm of spirit. And most visions and visual data that is shown to these prophets uh, are some kind of sketches. Like you take a canvas and draw some sketches, and this prophet is taken into these sketches, and he can interact with sketches and people, yet sketches of people in the diagram. He can interact with them. He can travel through the sketches. Maybe imagine like a three-dimensional sketch. And then he records everything that he sees and everything that he hears, and then writes for us. And then we study these visions over the years, and we begin to see what all the prophet saw were just sketches. The sketches mean something else. The sketches are representations of something else. So still he is seeing Semyon, is still seeing metaphors. That's the ground rule, unless you see an exception. So the visions may not be the concrete spiritual. To begin with, we don't know what is concrete spiritual. We are aliens, oblivious to that spirit world. So perhaps they're still seeing representations and sketches. No worries. Any other comments from anybody else? Coming back to abomination, desolation. I think Ezekiel 8, 2, it runs for a couple of chapters, maybe Ezekiel 8 to 10. If you can give a reading ahead of time for next Tuesday, that would be more beneficial for all of us.
Did you say Ezekiel 8:2-10?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I will put that in the email also, that Don will send, Don and Peggy sends. Once we are, then after Ezekiel 8, we are done with abomination, desolation, whatever we studied that far. Then I will be back to Jeremiah 51, and we will finish up that chapter. And then we are done with Babylon in the shadow. Then I will start 144,000 for 4 or 5 messages. Then we would come to Revelation chapter 17 and 18, spiritual Babylon. Once we are done, we will be back to Revelation 11, 2 witnesses, and we will, whatever we have gathered, we bring all the richness of the things we studied back to Revelation 11 and finish the Revelation 11. Then we are done with 2 witnesses. That's the plan. I hope to finish it by end of the year, but I'm very optimistic probably.